Rain came down like the sky was trying to drown the city of Seoul. And down beneath the streets, in a place the daylight people pretend doesn't exist, a man was walking into the worst decision of his life. He just didn't know it yet. His name was Kang Tae-min, billionaire, tech mogul, the kind of man who came down those steps in a suit worth more than the cars these gangsters were about to wreck, thinking the whole world should know who he was. And in his world they did. Boardrooms went silent when he walked in. Men with more money than sense lined up to shake his hand. He signed his name, and companies lived or died by morning. He had never once met a room he couldn't buy. But this wasn't his world. He just hadn't realized it yet. Because the second she walked in, the whole room went quiet. Not slowly. All at once. 200 people. Gamblers, gangsters, women in gold, men with guns they weren't even hiding, and every single one of them stopped breathing in the same heartbeat. A black motorcycle rolled in out of the rain. No revving. No show. It just arrived the way bad news arrives. The rider killed the engine, and somehow the silence got worse. She swung off that bike like she had all the time in the world. Black helmet, leather soaked through and shining under the neon. And when she pulled the helmet off and that dark hair came loose, Tae-min forgot there was anyone else in the building. A man the size of a door stepped out of her way. Then another. Hard men, dangerous men, the kind of men Tae-min would have paid to scare other people. And they were lowering their eyes like she might take them just for looking. His own driver grabbed his arm. The man had never touched him in his life. Sir. His voice was shaking. Do not look at her. But Tae-min was already moving. And you have to understand who this man was. He had never wanted anything he couldn't buy. Never chased anything that didn't run slow enough to be caught. Women came to him. They always came to him. He was bored of the chase before it even started, because for him it was never a chase. It was a formality. And then there was her. The one still point in a room full of terrified men. The one thing he couldn't read a price tag on. He wanted her before she even looked at him. So he stepped right into her path. Clothes. Clothes enough to smell the rain and the gun oil and something warm underneath it. You always make a room go this quiet, he said. Or did they just never meet a man who wasn't afraid of you? And the whole crowd behind him went dead still. Somebody whispered, no. His driver hissed his name like a prayer. Because everyone in that room, except Tae-min, knew exactly what he'd just done. She looked at him. Slow. Up, then down, then back up to his face. The way you'd look at something that wandered in off the street. Walk away, she said. While walking is still something you can do on your own. And he laughed. God help him, he laughed. That's the most interesting thing anyone said to me in a year. He leaned in. Have dinner with me. No. A drink, then. No. You haven't even asked my name. I don't need it, she said. Men like you all have the same one. And she turned to leave. And that should have been it. That should have been the moment he let her go. But this was a man who had never let anything go in his life. So he did the single stupidest thing a man has ever done. He reached out and he caught her wrist. And the room made a sound. A real sound, like 100 people gasping at once. Every gun in that place turned toward him, and he still didn't understand. He thought he was the dangerous one, the bold one. The man is brave enough to touch the untouchable woman. She looked down at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked back up at him, and the smile she gave him, oh, that smile would haunt this man for the rest of his life. It wasn't angry. It wasn't flattered. It was the smile of someone deciding whether to be amused by you or to be done with you forever. You think you're chasing me, she said low just for him. That's adorable. She leaned in until her mouth was almost at his ear. But some women aren't running. We're just deciding how close to let you get before it costs you everything. And she lifted his hand off her wrist, one finger at a time, like she was peeling something dead off her sleeve. And then she said the thing that would change his entire life. You chase women. That's your whole life. You chase, you catch, you get bored. She tilted her head. But me? I'm not the kind of woman you chase. I'm the kind you're supposed to be afraid of. You just haven't figured out why yet. She put the helmet back on. The engine roared to life, and she was gone up the ramp and into the rain, before he could take a single breath. And the whole room exhaled at once and turned to stare at him like he'd just come back from the dead. He should have been afraid. Every instinct in that room was screaming at him to be afraid. Instead, he stood there in the neon and the noise, with his heart going like a hammer, and realized he'd never felt this alive in his entire life. And here's what he didn't know. Here's what would have sent him running up those stairs and back into his safe, boring, breathing life if he'd had any sense at all. When she leaned in close, when she brushed past him, she'd lifted the watch right off his wrist. Half a second. He felt nothing. She read the name engraved inside the band, and she put it back before he ever knew her hand had moved. Kang Tae-min, CEO. Worth a number with too many zeros to fear anything. She didn't smile because he amused her. She smiled because she had just learned exactly who he was. And in her world, a man like him wasn't a threat. He wasn't even a prize. He was a toy. She didn't ask his name because she was curious about him. She'd known it the whole time. And the most dangerous woman in all of Asia had just decided to let him live for now, because he was the first interesting thing she'd seen in years. He thought he'd found a beautiful mystery on a motorcycle. What he'd actually done was flirt with the queen everyone feared. And that, my friend, was only his first mistake. It would not be his last. If you're new here, welcome to Heartthread Tales. Hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me, because trust me, you do not want to miss where this one goes. And if you've been with me from the start, drop a comment and tell me, that first time you laid eyes on someone you just knew was trouble, did you walk away? Or did you walk right up to them like Tae-min did? Smash that like button, because this man just flirted with the most dangerous woman in Asia, and she already knows his name. And this story is only getting started. Tae-min didn't sleep that night, and if you've never had something get into your blood like this, you won't believe how bad it was. He had a company to run. He had a city's worth of people waiting on decisions only he could make. And he spent the whole morning staring at a wall, hearing her voice. I'm not the kind of woman you chase. He'd had women tell him they loved him, and it landed lighter than that one sentence did. By noon, he'd done something he had never done for anyone. He had his people pull every camera, every record, every contact from that underground arena. He sat across from his head of security, a man who'd worked for him 11 years, and watched the man's face go gray as he read what he'd found. Sir, I'd ask you to drop this. I don't pay you to ask me things. The man put one photo on the desk. Just one. Her helmet off, taken from across a street at night. And under it, no name. No file. Where a name should have been, someone had typed 3 words. Do not pursue. That's all there is, the man said quietly. 11 sources. Nobody will say her name out loud. The 2 who started to, well, they're not answering their phones anymore. Sir, whoever she is not in our weight class. She's not anyone's. And here's where you learn something about Tae-min that he was not proud of. That should have scared him. Instead, it thrilled him. Because all his life, everything had a price and a paper trail and a way to win. And here was a woman that the most expensive security in the country couldn't even put a name to. A woman who erased people for saying too much. He didn't think about running. He thought finally. What he did not know, what he'd have given anything to know, was that while he was hunting her, she already had a file on him 3 inches thick. She knew his mother's maiden name. She knew the offshore accounts his lawyers swore were invisible. She knew that his empire, all those companies, all that money he was so proud of, ran on infrastructure her people had quietly owned for years. He thought he was a king. He was a tenant who didn't know he was paying rent. And somewhere across the city, in a room that still gives me chills to describe, she slid his photo across a long black table to the only people in the world she trusted, and she said one thing. Leave him alive. He's the first interesting thing I've seen in years. Not leave him alone. Leave him alive. There's a difference. Tae-min just hadn't learned it yet. He found her 3 nights later. Or he thought he did. The truth is she let him. A name had surfaced, a high-end club downtown, members only, the kind of place even his money usually had to wait for. He walked in like he owned it, because old habits don't die, and there she was at the far end of the room. No leather this time, a black dress, and that same stillness, like the whole loud, bright room was happening around her and none of it could reach her. She didn't look surprised to see him. That should have been his first warning. He sat down across from her without asking. "You're following me," she said. "You're easy to find." No. She finally looked at him, and there was something almost like pity in it. "I'm impossible to find. You found me because I wanted to see if you were stupid enough to come." And, "Am I?" "Yes." A pause. "But you're a beautiful kind of stupid. I haven't decided yet if that's worth my time." He leaned in. He gave her the smile that had closed billion-dollar rooms. "Then let me make the case." And for 1 second, 1 single second, something flickered across her face that wasn't ice. Something almost soft, like a woman who'd forgotten what it felt like to be talked to instead of feared, and hated how much she didn't hate it. She covered it fast. But he saw it. He'd built his whole life on reading what people try to hide, and he saw it. That was the moment he stopped being curious about her and started being obsessed. And that, looking back, was the moment she should have walked away from him. Because letting a man like that see the crack in her armor was the most dangerous thing the most dangerous woman in Asia had done in years. Her phone lit up on the table between them. Just a flash. But he caught the name on the screen before she turned it over. It was his name. Why was the most untouchable woman in the city getting a message about him? She stood up before he could ask, smoothed her dress, looked down at him with all the warmth gone, locked back behind the ice. "Go home, Mr. Kang." For the first time she said his name, and the way she said it told him she'd known it all along. "Tonight, while home is still somewhere you can go." She walked out, and he sat there with his heart pounding and one cold thought finally cutting through the obsession. She knew his name. He had never told her his name. He should have gone home. She told him to. His own security begged him to. Every smart instinct he'd ever built a fortune on was screaming the same word. Home. Instead, he followed her out into the rain. He told himself it was because she had a message about him on her phone and he deserved to know why. That was a lie. The truth was he couldn't stand the thought of watching her walk away from him a second time. He'd have followed her off a roof. She was already on the bike when he came out the side door, engine low, helmet under one arm. And the look she gave him when she saw him standing there in the rain wasn't surprising. It was disappointing. The kind you feel when someone proves they're exactly as foolish as you feared. "You don't listen," she said. "I've been told it's a flaw. It's going to be the thing that kills you." And that's when the first car came around the corner with its lights off. He didn't even understand what he was looking at. A black car, no headlights, moving too fast on a wet street and a window already down. His brain was still catching up when she moved. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. She grabbed a fistful of his expensive coat and threw him, onto the back of the bike, and the world exploded. He'd never heard gunfire up close. Movies get it wrong. It's not a crack. It's a punch you feel in your chest. And the wall where he'd been standing 1 second earlier came apart in a spray of brick and sparks. The bike launched, and he wrapped his arms around her waist and held on like a child, his face pressed into her wet shoulder, the whole city tilting and screaming past as she threw that machine through gaps he'd have sworn weren't there. Behind them, 2 cars, then 3, headlights swinging across the rain, engines roaring, and somewhere in all of it the flat, hard sound of more gunfire. "Who are they?" he shouted into her ear. "Why are they shooting at me?" "They're not shooting at you." She took a corner so hard his knee nearly kissed the asphalt. "They're shooting at me. You're just standing in front of it." She rode like the rain wasn't there, like the cars weren't there, like death was just one more thing that answered to her. She slid them under a truck, turning across an intersection, close enough that he felt the heat of it, and the car behind them didn't make it. He heard the crunch and the horn and didn't dare look back. And here's the part that should have terrified him most. Somewhere in the middle of the most frightening 90 seconds of his life, with men trying to kill him and a city blurring past at speeds that should have ended them both, he felt her heartbeat against his arms. Steady, slow, calm. His was a war drum. Hers was a metronome. That's when it really hit him. Deeper than the club, deeper than the file his people couldn't crack. This wasn't a thrill to her. This wasn't a bad night. This was a Tuesday. Men with guns were a routine. She'd survived so many times her pulse didn't even rise. What kind of woman lives like this? She took them down into a parking structure, killed the lights, killed the engine, and pulled them into the black behind a concrete pillar. The cars screamed past on the level above, then the level below, then faded into the rain. Silence. Just the two of them breathing in the dark, his arms still locked around her, neither one moving. "You can let go now," she said. He didn't. "Mr. Kang. My name is Tae-min." His voice came out rough. "You keep calling me Mr. Kang like I'm a stranger. After tonight, I think you can use my name." She turned her head. In the dark, he could barely see her. Just the shape of her, the shine of her eyes. "That's the problem," she said softly. "I shouldn't know your name. I shouldn't have come back for you. And I definitely shouldn't do this." "Do what?" She didn't answer with words. She kissed him, and it wasn't soft and it wasn't sweet. It was a woman who'd spent years letting nothing past her walls, deciding, for one reckless second, to let something through. He felt her hands fist in his soaked shirt. He felt the calm finally break. Just a little, just for him. And then she pulled back like she'd touched a flame, and the walls slammed down, so hard he almost heard them. "That was a mistake," she said. "It didn't feel like one. The best ones never do." She got off the bike, put distance between them. "There's a stairwell behind you. It comes out 2 blocks from a main road. Get a taxi. Go home. And Tae-min." It was the first time she'd used it. His name. It landed like a touch. "Forget you ever saw me. For your sake. Not mine. And if I can't..." She was already pulling the helmet back on, already becoming the untouchable thing again. "Then you'll learn what I tried to warn you about," she said. "Some women cost more than you can afford to pay. And you, Mr. Kang, are about to spend everything." The engine roared. She was gone, and he stood alone in a dark parking garage, soaked to the bone, lips still warm, and he did the math on what had just happened. 3 cars, a dozen men, automatic weapons, an ambush in the middle of a major city, and she'd driven out of it without her hand shaking. Whoever wanted her dead had an army, and whoever she was worth sending an army after. He should have run. He went looking for her again the next morning. If you're loving this, do me one favor right now, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single part of the story, because it is about to get so much bigger than one man and one motorcycle. And drop me a comment and tell me the truth. He just got shot at, kissed in the dark, and warned to his face to run. And he's already planning to find her again the next morning. Is that love, or is that a death wish? Let me know. Smash that like button, and let's keep going, because the people who tried to kill her tonight just made the biggest mistake of their lives. For the first time in his life, Tae-min went looking for someone, and the whole city went silent. He's a man who finds things. Information is what he does. He pointed every resource he had at one woman, and one by one, every door closed before he reached it. The club, he'd found her and claimed it, had no record of the night. The street where they'd been ambushed had no cameras, none, in a city watched by 10,000 eyes. It was like she could reach into the world and quietly delete herself from it. And that was when he stopped chasing the woman and started understanding the shape of her. You don't make a city blind. You don't make armed men lower their eyes and forget your face. Not with money. Not with power like his. He could buy a senator. He could not buy what she had. And the more walls he hit, the more he understood that the thing protecting her wasn't security. It was fear. "Now let me take you somewhere Tae-min was not allowed to see. Somewhere he only learned about it much later, when it was far too late to walk away. Across the city, in a room with no windows and a long black table, sat 3 people who would have made the whole world afraid if the whole world knew their names. At the head sat the one they called the Queen, Han Seo-yeon, though no one at that table would have dared say it out loud. To her right sat the only man who'd been with her since the beginning, Ji-ho, loyal as a shadow and just as quiet, the man who'd pulled her out of the fire the night her family died, and never once left her side since. If she had a heart left at all, it was kept safe in his hands. And she was angry. Not loud. She didn't do it out loud. She was the kind of angry that made grown killers study the table in front of them. 3 cars, she said. 12 men. On my street. Aimed at me. She let the silence stretch. Who told Beck where I'd be? Nobody spoke. And in that nobody a seed was planted. One person at that table looked just a little too still. Beck. Tae-min would learn that name soon enough. The rival. The ghost from her past. The one man in Asia who didn't fear her because he was the reason she'd had to become something to be feared in the first place. He's testing me, she said. He smells the throne sitting open, and he thinks I'm distracted. Her eyes moved slow around the table. Am I distracted? The billionaire, Ji-ho said carefully. You let him live. People are talking. They're saying the Queen has a soft spot. And I wish I could tell you she denied it. That would have been the safe thing, the smart thing, the thing the most dangerous woman in Asia should have done. Instead, she was quiet for 1 second too long. Let them talk, she said. Anyone who confuses a soft spot for a weakness can come find out which one it is. But Ji-ho had known her too long. He saw the same crack Tae-min had seen in that club. And the man who loved her like a brother felt the first cold drop of dread, because he understood something even she didn't want to admit. She was starting to feel something for a man who could be used to destroy her. Tae-min didn't know any of that. What he knew was that 2 days after the ambush, a car was waiting outside his building. Not his. Long, black, silent. The back door opened on its own as he stepped onto the curb, and a voice from inside that he didn't recognize said 4 words. She wants to see you. Now, every smart cell in his body said do not get in that car. He'd been shot at. He'd been warned. He'd watched a woman drive through gunfire without blinking and walk away from him 3 separate times. He got in the car because he was not the kind of man who runs from the only thing that ever made him feel alive. The doors locked. The city slid past the tinted glass and turned into parts of the city he'd never seen, the places under the places, and he felt his phone lose signal, and he understood that wherever he was going, no one could follow. And for the first time, a small cold voice in the back of his mind asked the question he'd been too obsessed to ask. What if she didn't want to see him kiss her again? What if she'd decided he knew too much? The car stopped. The door opened. And 2 men he'd never want to meet in a dark room gestured for him to step out into a warehouse the size of a cathedral, empty, echoing, lit by a single hanging light. She was standing under it, out of the leather, out of the dress, a sharp black suit, hair pulled back, and an expression he had never seen on her before. Cold all the way down, no crack, no flicker, nothing soft left anywhere on her face. This wasn't the woman from the parking garage. This was something else. Sit down, Mr. Kang, she said. There was 1 chair, in the middle of all that empty space. What is this? His voice didn't sound as steady as he wanted. This, she said, is me deciding what to do with you. If your heart is racing, you're exactly where I want you. So hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because the truth about who she really is 1 part away. Drop a comment. Would you have gotten in that car? Be honest. And smash that like button because everything changes now. Tae-min had sat across from men who could end careers with a phone call. He'd negotiated deals where 1 wrong word cost 100 million. He thought he knew what pressure felt like. He knew nothing. Pressure is sitting in a single chair in the middle of an empty warehouse, while a woman walks slowly circles around you and you cannot read a single thing on her face. You've been looking for me, she said. Behind him now. He couldn't see her. You pointed your little empire at me, like a flashlight. Cameras. Contacts. That sad man you call the head of security. She came back into view. Did you find anything? No. No, she agreed. And it never once occurred to you to ask why. I'm asking now. She stopped in front of him, crouched down so they were eye to eye. And this close, with no crowd and no rain and no helmet between them, he finally saw it. Not the mystery, not the heat, the thing underneath both. She was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Tired the way a person gets when they've carried something heavy for so long they've forgotten what their hands felt like empty. Every door you knocked on closed, she said, because I closed it. Every man who knew my name forgot it, because forgetting is safer than remembering. You couldn't find me, Tae-min, because I am not a woman you find. I'm a decision other people make about how badly they want to keep breathing. Then why am I still breathing? And for the first time, she didn't have an instant answer. He watched the most controlled person he'd ever met fight a war with herself in total silence, and he understood that his life was being weighed right then, in real time, against whatever it was she felt when she looked at him. I should have let those men take you on the street, she said. It would have been cleaner. A billionaire dies in a random shooting, the city mourns for a week, and my problem solves itself. But you didn't. No. Her voice dropped. I threw you on the back of my bike, and I drove through gunfire to keep you alive, and I have spent 2 days trying to understand why, and I hate that I don't have an answer. She stood up fast, like being that close to him was the dangerous part. That's what this is, she said, turning away. I brought you here to remind myself that you're a liability, a loose thread. The smart thing, the thing I would do to anyone else, is cut you and walk away and never think about you again. So do it. He stood up out of the chair. His legs were shaking, and he didn't care. If I'm so easy to forget, forget me. But you won't. You know how I know. She went still. Because you keep coming back to. He took a step toward her. You let me find that club. You came back for me on that street when leaving me would have been smarter. You kissed me in the dark when no one was watching. You're not deciding whether to cut me. You're standing in an empty warehouse trying to convince yourself you still can. The silence after that was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. She turned around, and the look on her face wasn't ice anymore. It was something raw, something closer to fear, on a woman who feared nothing. You have no idea what I am, she said. Then tell me. If I tell you, she said, there's no door back to your old life. No going home. You stop being a man who flirted with a stranger, and you become a man who knows. And men who know don't get to be safe ever again. She searched his face. Walk out that door. Right now. And I'll let you forget all of this. That's the kindest thing I will ever offer anyone. I'm offering it to you. Take it. And there it was. The exit. The off-ramp. The one chance to go back to his boring, safe, breathing life. He looked at the open door behind him. He looked at her. I don't want to be safe, he said. I want the truth. I want you. Something broke in her face. Not coldly. Sadly. Like he'd just chosen wrong, and there was no fixing it now. Then God help you, she whispered. Because you just made the worst decision of your life. And you're not even going to be the one who pays for it. Before he could ask what that meant, her phone rang. She answered without looking away from him, listened, and he watched every soft thing drain out of her face, and the ice came back all at once, harder than before, until he was looking at a stranger in a sharp black suit. Say that again, she said into the phone. A pause. When? Another pause, and then she looked at him, and for the first time there was something in her eyes he never expected to see pointed at him. Pity. They have your sister, she said. Now, to understand what happens next, you have to understand who she really was. Because Tae-min was about to find out the worst possible way. Her name was Han Seo-yeon, though almost no one alive was allowed to say it. To the rest, she was one word, whispered, never spoken to her face. The Queen. And she built that name out of ash. People think power is money. Tae-min certainly did. He had so much money it had made him stupid. Made him think a number in an account was the same as a hand around a throat. It isn't. Power is when a man who wants to kill you decides not to, because he's done the math on what it would cost him. Power is silence in a loud room. Power is a city full of cameras going blind, because everyone behind them is more afraid of you than of the law. She had spent 10 years earning that silence, one body at a time, and she was not proud of all of it, but she was not ashamed of most of it either, because when men murdered the only family she had, and the police shrugged and the courts looked away, she learned the only lesson that ever mattered. The world does not protect you. You become something the world is afraid to touch, or you become a story people tell about a girl who disappeared. She chose to be feared. So let me show you a normal night for the queen. Just a few nights before all this began. She sat in a back room above a fish market that smelled of salt and diesel, and a man knelt on the floor in front of her. He'd been skimming, moving product through her routes and pocketing the difference. And worse, much worse, he'd been talking to people he shouldn't. He was crying, promising, naming his children like they were a defense. Her men waited for the word. They always waited for the word. That's what power is, the word, and the certainty that it will be obeyed. She didn't raise her voice. She never does. Screaming is what people do when they're not sure they'll be listened to. You stole from me, she said. I can forgive theft. Theft is just hunger with bad manners. She leaned forward. But you talked. And the man you talked to is the one man in this world I cannot allow to know my business. Beck, he whispered. I didn't know it was him. I swear I didn't. I believe you. And she did. That's the only reason your children still have a father tonight. She let him live, took everything he had, put him out on the street with nothing, and let him live. And do you understand why? Not mercy. A dead thief is a body, but a ruined man telling everyone what happens when you cross the queen. That's an advertisement. She doesn't kill when fear will do the work for free. That is the woman Tae-min thought he was flirting with. A woman who weighs your life like loose change and decides, in the time it takes you to blink, whether keeping you alive is useful. And the terrible thing, the thing she had never said out loud to anyone, was that somewhere in the middle of all that ice, a billionaire with a stupid smile had asked her to have dinner with him. And she had wanted to say, yes. 10 years. 10 years of being a wall, a name, a threat. And one foolish man looked at her like she was a woman instead of a verdict. And something she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it existed turned over in its grave. That was the only weakness she had ever had. And her enemies found it in 3 days. His sister, Beck, took Tae-min's sister to draw the queen out. Because Beck is not stupid, and Beck had been watching, and Beck understood before she would even admit it to herself that the queen had finally given the world something she was afraid to lose. Which is why, the night they took the sister, they took Tae-min too. He woke up on a concrete floor with a bag over his head and his hands bound and the taste of blood in his mouth. When they pulled the bag off, he was in a warehouse that wasn't hers. Cold light, water dripping somewhere, and a circle of men with guns, and in a chair across from him, his sister, pale and terrified and alive. A man stepped into the light, older, calm, a scar through one eyebrow and a smile like a door opening onto nothing. Kang Tae-min, he said, the billionaire who flirted with the queen. He crouched in front of him. Do you even know what you touched? Let my sister go. She's just the bait. He patted Tae-min's cheek. You're the hook. He stood, checked his watch, and looked toward the big doors at the end of the warehouse like a man expecting a guest. She'll come. She always comes when it's personal now. That's new. That's her mistake. He smiled wider. And it's going to get her killed. Tae-min still didn't understand. She who? The biker? What did a woman on a motorcycle have to do with men and guns and his sister bound to a chair? He was still that naive, right up until the doors opened. They didn't break the doors down. They opened them, slow, and the wind off the river came through, and a single figure walked in out of the dark, and Tae-min watched a room full of armed killers do the last thing he expected. They went silent. She walked toward them, through the middle of them. No leather, no motorcycle, a black suit soaked to the shoulders, and a stillness that made the air feel heavy. And as she passed, one by one, men with guns in their hands lowered their eyes. The man with the scar didn't lower his eyes. He spread his arms like he was welcoming an old friend. And someone near Tae-min, one of the man's own men, young, shaking, made the mistake of saying it out loud. The word, the title, the truth Tae-min had been chasing through a city that kept going blind. Mafia Queen. And Tae-min turned and looked at her, at the woman he'd flirted with in the rain, the woman he'd asked to dinner, the woman he'd kissed in the dark and chased through a closed city and refused an hour ago to walk away from. And every single strange thing finally arranged itself into one unbearable picture. The bowing men, the blind cameras, the army sent to kill her, leave him alive. Some women aren't chaste. They're feared. She wasn't a mystery he'd been solving. She was the most dangerous person in Asia, and he had been flirting with her like she was a girl on a bike. She stopped in the center of the room, looked at the man with the scar, and finally, Tae-min heard her say his name. "Hello, Beck." Her voice was the calmest thing in the world. "You took something of mine." "I took two things." He gestured at Tae-min, at the sister. "The question is which one you came for." She looked at Tae-min then. One look, and there was an apology buried in it somewhere under all that ice. An apology for what he was about to see. Then she turned back to Beck, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Wrong question," she said. "The question is how many of these men think they'll be alive in 5 minutes." There it is. The reveal. The woman he was flirting with is the woman a whole city goes blind to protect. And he found out in the worst possible way, on his knees, with his sister's life in the balance. If your jaw is on the floor, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what she does next, because I promise you it is brutal. Drop a comment the moment you realized who she was. Did you gasp or did you see it coming? And smash that like button, because the queen just walked into a room full of guns and told them they're already dead. Let's go. What happened next took maybe 40 seconds. Tae-min has replayed it for years, and it still takes 40 seconds. Beck snapped his fingers. The men who hadn't lowered their eyes raised their guns. And she moved. He'd seen her drive through gunfire. He thought he understood what she was. He understood nothing. She didn't pull a weapon, not at first. She stepped sideways behind the nearest man, used him as a wall while the others fired, and Tae-min heard the body take what was meant for her. Then there was a gun in her hand that had been in that man's a half second before, and the warehouse turned into noise and muzzle flash and men falling. And through all of it, she never once looked rushed. And that's the part Tae-min can't forget. The calm. Other people panic in violence. She got quieter, like the chaos was a language she was fluent in, and the rest of them were just learning the alphabet. 2 of Beck's men grabbed Tae-min and his sister and started dragging them toward a side door. He felt a barrel against the back of his head, and he remembers thinking almost calmly, so this is how it ends, and being more upset that he'd never see her again than that he was about to die. He didn't see her cross the room. He just felt the hand on his collar go loose and the gun leave his head, and when he turned, the man who'd been about to kill him was on the floor, and she was standing over him, chest heaving, blood on her sleeve that wasn't hers. "Are you hit?" she said. "No, your sister." "I'm okay," the sister whispered, staring at Seo-yeon like she was looking at a god or a nightmare and couldn't decide which. "Then don't move, either of you." She was already turning back. "It's not finished." And here's the thing she would tell you herself, if she ever told anyone anything. It was almost finished before she walked in. By the time she reached him, 11 of Beck's 14 men were down. Not all dead. She doesn't waste death, but down and out of the fight, and that is its own kind of mercy that no one ever thanks her for. She had done the math the moment she walked in. She always does the math. 14 guns, 1 room, 2 hostages, exits here and here. She knew how it would end before Beck ever snapped his fingers. The only variable she couldn't solve for was the one kneeling on the floor, watching her become the thing she'd warned him about. That was new, caring how someone watched her work. She had killed men in front of frightened witnesses 100 times and never once felt their eyes. She felt his. Every shot. She felt him learning her. The real her, the one under the rain and the banter, and some small, stupid part of her that she'd thought died with her family wanted to stop and explain. I didn't do this for fun. I did it because the world made a girl into a weapon, and weapons don't get to choose what they cut. But you don't explain yourself in the middle of a gunfight. You finish it. Beck was already gone. He'd slipped out the back the moment the first shot landed, the way he always does, leaving his men to die for the few extra seconds it bought him. He's a coward. He has always been a coward. It's the only reason he's still alive after all these years, and the reason she has never been able to finish him. But he left someone behind. She walked to the last man standing. The young one. The one who'd whispered her title. He'd dropped his gun. He had his hands up. He was crying, the way they all cry at the end, and she stopped in front of him and tilted her head the way she'd tilted it at Tae-min in the rain 100 years ago, when all of this was still a flirtation. You set this up, she said to him. Not a question. You're not Beck's. You're mine. Or you were. You told him where I'd be that night on the street. You told him about the sister. A pause. You told him about me and the billionaire. The boy shook so hard he could barely speak. He has my mother, he sobbed. He said he'd. I know. Her voice was almost gentle. Beck always finds the thing you can't bear to lose. It's the only talent he has. She looked at him for a long moment. That's why I'm going to let you live. The boy's head came up, disbelieving. Go to Beck, she said. Tell him I said this exactly. Tell him I know he's still using the old playbook. Find what they love, then squeeze. Tell him it worked for 10 years. She crouched down to the boy's level, and her voice dropped so low Tae-min almost couldn't hear it. And tell him it just stopped working tonight. Because the only thing I had left to lose, I'm done pretending I'm afraid to lose it. She stood, and she looked at Tae-min when she said the last part. Right at him. The boy ran. And then it was just the 3 of them in a warehouse full of groaning men, and she stood there with blood on her sleeve and 10 years of armor on her face, and for 1 second the armor slipped, and underneath it Tae-min saw the most frightening thing of the whole night. She wasn't a monster. He'd almost have preferred a monster. She was a woman who'd been forced to become one, and who'd just admitted out loud, in front of her enemy's spy, that she'd started to care about him, which meant he wasn't safe. It meant he'd made her unsafe. We need to go, she said. Both of you. Now, there's a car. She wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. The door had closed. And then, Mr. Kang, you and I are going to have the conversation I've spent 10 years making sure I'd never have to have with anyone. Which conversation is that? She finally looked at him, and the ice was gone, and what was left was just tired and sad and real. The one where I tell you everything, she said, and you decide whether you can love something that has this much blood on it. She kept her word in a safe house Tae-min will never be able to find again. It wasn't what you'd picture. No gold, no guards lining the walls. A small, clean room above the water, 1 lamp, 2 chairs, his sister asleep in the next room after a doctor who didn't ask questions checked her over and left without a word. Just the 2 of them, and 10 years she'd never said out loud to anyone. And she told him all of it. I won't repeat every word, because some of it was hers and still is. But I'll tell you the shape of it, because the shape is what broke his heart. She wasn't born into this. That's what people always assume about someone like her, that she crawled up out of something rotten. She didn't. She was 19. She had a father who fixed watches, and a little brother who wanted to be a pilot, and a mother who sang in the kitchen, and they were poor and ordinary and happy in the way that only poor and ordinary people ever really get to be. And then her father's small shop sat on a corner, that a powerful man wanted. And her father said no. And one night men came. And by morning Seoyan was the only one left, 19 years old, pulled out of a burning building by a boy named Jiho, who worked for the people, who'd become her only family from then on. I went to the police, she said. She was looking at the lamp, not at him. I had names. I had a witness. Me. I sat in that station for 9 hours, and at the end of it, a detective told me to go home and forget it. The man who ordered it owned the man across the desk from me. I just hadn't understood yet that some men own the law the way you own a car. So you stopped trusting the law. I stopped believing in it. There's a difference. She finally looked at him. I decided that if the world would only protect the people it feared, then I would become something it had to fear. And I was very, very good at it. That's the part no one tells you. That you might be good at it. That the thing that ruins your soul might also be the thing you have a gift for. And Tae-min sat there in that small room, and he thought about his own life, his father's empire, handed to him with a bow on it. Every door opened before he reached it. He'd been bored, while a girl from his own city, a girl his city had failed, was turning herself into a weapon just to survive being alive. The man who ordered it, he said. Did you? He's dead. Flat. Final. It took me 4 years. He was the first. He was not the last. She watched his face for the flinch. There it is. That's the look. That's the one I warned you about. Go ahead. It's allowed. But here's the thing. Tae-min wasn't flinching at her. He was doing math of his own. Because there was a detail in her story, a small one. A date, a district, the name of the powerful man's company, and it was sitting wrong in his chest like a swallowed stone. He knew that company. He knew that company because his father had bought a piece of it the same year. He'd seen the name 100 times in the old files when he took over, a quiet little holding he'd never thought twice about. And he didn't say it. God forgive him, he didn't say it. He told himself he needed to be sure first. He told himself a lot of things. But the truth is he'd just found her hand again across a table after the worst night of both their lives. And he couldn't bear to be the one to let go of it. I don't see a monster, he said instead. I see someone who survived a world that should be ashamed of itself. And something cracked in her face. She'd braced for disgust. She had no defense ready for the other thing. You should go home, she said, but her voice had no force in it. I don't have a home anymore, he said. You told me that yourself. I'm a man who knows now. I belong wherever you are. And for the first time since the rain, she let him close the distance without warning him away. She let him hold her, and I want that on the record because she'd let no one hold her in 10 years. Jiho used to try in the early days. He'd find her after a bad night, shaking, 19 still living somewhere inside the weapon she was building, and he'd put a hand on her shoulder, and she'd shrug it off because she'd learned that softness was a door and doors get kicked in. But she let this stupid, rich, reckless man hold her in a room above the water, and she told herself it was just for one night, just this once, because tomorrow the war started in earnest and she'd need to be a wall again. What she didn't tell him, because she didn't fully understand it yet herself, was that something was wrong inside her own house. Beck knew too much. He always knew too much. He knew the street that night. He knew about the sister. He knew about Tae-min before she'd even admitted Tae-min mattered. A spy on the floor of a warehouse couldn't explain all of it. Someone closer was feeding him. Someone who'd been in the room when she made her plans. Someone she trusted with the only thing she had left, which was her life. She had 11 people she trusted with her life. By morning, she'd have a reason to suspect 10 of them, and the 11th was asleep in the next room, dreaming the easy dreams of a man who'd just learned the truth about her and chosen to stay anyway, holding a piece of a secret about his own father that, when it finally came out, was going to burn down everything they'd just started to build. He found out the truth about her, and he stayed. He held her, and she let him, the first person in 10 years. To her own house starts now. If that hits you somewhere, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you're here for what happens when the rest of the truth comes out, because there's a piece of this even she doesn't know yet, and it's sitting in his chest right now. Drop a comment and tell me, he's hiding what he suspects about his own father to keep her close. Is that love protecting her? Or is that a lie that's going to destroy them both? And smash that like button, because the betrayal inside her own house starts now. The morning after she told him everything, Tae-min woke up alone, not abandoned. There was coffee and a man by the door who nodded at him like he was furniture, and his sister at a small table looking better than she had in days. But Seo-yeon was already gone, already working, already a wall again. The woman who'd let him hold her in the dark had folded herself back into the queen before the sun came up, and he understood why by noon. Because by noon, she'd gathered the 10 people she trusted most into a room, and she'd started hunting one of them. This is the part of her life she would give anything to undo. So let me tell you straight, 10 people. Each one had bled for her. Each one had killed for her. Each one had earned a seat in that room over years. And now she had to look at all 10 and accept that one of them had sold her to the man who burned her family alive. She didn't accuse me. Accusations are for people who don't have a plan. She did what she always does. She laid a trap. She called them in one at a time, and to each one she gave a different piece of false information, a different safe house, a different time, a different route for a shipment that didn't exist. 10 lies, each one unique, each one a marked bill. Then she waited to see which lie reached back. She told Tae-min to stay out of it. She told him this was hers. He didn't listen. Of course he didn't listen. Not listening is the entire reason he was in her life. Because here's what she didn't know he could do. She had reached in the underworld that he couldn't dream of. But Tae-min had something she didn't. He had built half the digital nervous system this city runs on. The networks, the data, the quiet rivers of information that flow under everything. She owned the streets. He owned the wires. So while she set her 10 traps in the world of men and fear, he went into the wires. He didn't tell her at first because he knew she'd say no, and because, if he's honest, he needed to be useful to her. He'd spent his whole life having everything and being needed by no one. He needed to be the one who mattered for once. He traced the money. Because that's the thing about leverage, about blackmail. It always touches money somewhere, and money always leaves a trail in the wires if you know how to read it. Beck was paying someone, carefully, through 6 shells and 2 countries. But 6 shells and 2 countries is nothing to a man who builds shells and countries for a living. It took him 11 hours. He didn't sleep. And when the last layer peeled back and a name sat there on his screen, glowing, undeniable, he felt the floor go out from under him for the 2nd time that week. Because it wasn't a name he wanted to bring to her. It was the name of the one person she'd never suspect. The one person she couldn't survive losing. The boy who'd pulled her out of the fire. Ji-ho. She didn't believe him. And to be fair to her, why would she? He walked into that safe house with his screen full of proof and told the most paranoid woman in Asia that her oldest friend, her brother in everything but blood, the man who'd carried her out of a burning building when she was 19, was selling her to the man who'd set the fire. She went very still, then very cold. You traced money, she said. Money lies. Beck could have planted that to turn me against the one man I'd never doubt. That's exactly the kind of thing Beck does. I thought of that. I checked. Seo-yeon, the payment started before I ever met you. This isn't new. This has been going on for... Stop talking. 2 years. He's been... I said stop. Her voice cracked, just slightly on the second word, and that crack scared Tae-min more than any gun ever had. You don't get to walk into my house and take the only family I have left. You've known me for weeks. He has known me for 10 years. And one of you is lying to you right now, he said. Test it. You set 10 traps this morning. You gave 10 different lies. So tell me, which lie did Beck act on? She didn't answer. She already knew. He saw it land. She'd had the answer for an hour and had been holding it away from herself with both hands, the way you hold a door against something heavy, the shipment that got hid at dawn, the route that got ambushed, the safe house that got watched. She'd given that exact lie to one person. She'd given it to Ji-ho. She'd given it to Ji-ho because giving it to Ji-ho felt like a formality. She almost hadn't included him at all. Halfway through she'd thought, why am I even testing him? And included him anyway out of habit, out of the discipline that had kept her alive for a decade, the discipline that says trust no one, not even the one you die for. And the discipline was right. The discipline is always right. That's the curse of it. She didn't want it to be him. She has wanted very few things in her life as much as she wanted it to not be him. She found him on the roof of the fish market, the place they used to go in the early years, when the weight of what they were building got too heavy, the one place in the world she'd ever let herself sit down and just be tired next to someone. He was already there, like he'd known she'd come, like he'd been waiting to stop running. He didn't deny it. That's the part she'll carry forever. He turned around and looked at her, and he didn't deny a single thing. How long have you known? He said. An hour. He nodded slowly. I always wondered how it would feel when you finally looked at me like that. He tried to smile. It didn't hold. Like I'm one of them. Why? Her voice didn't sound like her own. I would have given you anything. You only had to ask. Anything I have, Ji-ho, it was always half yours. Why? And he told her. And it was the worst possible answer, because it wasn't greed, and it wasn't hate, and it wasn't power. It was the same answer the boy in the warehouse gave. The same answer that has driven every blade that's ever found her back. He has my daughter, Ji-ho said. You don't know I have one. I made sure no one knew, because I learned how to keep what I love hidden from a woman who taught me to keep what I love hidden. Tears now, running freely down a face she'd trusted with her life. Beck found her 4 years ago. Every month I feed him a little, and every month she stays alive one more month. That's the whole deal. That's been my whole life. He looked at her wrecked. You of all people know exactly what I'd do to keep her breathing. You taught me. Find what they love, then squeeze. And there it was, her own lesson, her own playbook, used against her by the man she loved most, who learned it watching her become a monster. The thing she'd built to protect herself had been the knife in her back the whole time. She just lost the last family she had, and she found out the weapon that destroyed her is one she built with her own hands. If your chest is tight right now, that's the story working, so hit that subscribe button and stay with me. Drop a comment and be honest with me. Ji-ho betrayed her to save his daughter. Do you hate him, or do you understand him? Because I'm not sure there's a right answer. And smash that like button, because what she does in the next 5 minutes will decide whether she's still someone Tae-min can love. She has killed people for far less than what Ji-ho did. And you have to understand that before I tell you what she did on that roof, a man at her table had once skimmed the product and talked to the wrong person, and she'd put him on the street with nothing. Ji-ho had fed her enemy her secrets for 4 years. By every rule she'd ever lived by the cold math that had kept her breathing for a decade, there was only one ending to that conversation on the roof. She looked at the man who'd carried her out of the fire, and she couldn't. Go, she said. He stared at her. Get your daughter. Tonight. Before Beck realizes you're blown and uses her one last time. She was already turning away, because if she looked at him another second, she'd lose the nerve to do the merciful thing. I'll buy you the hours. Run, Ji-ho. Don't ever let me see you again. That's the only gift I have left to give you, and it's the last one. Seo-yun. Don't. Her voice broke all the way through this time. Don't make me take it back. And he ran. She let the man who betrayed her run, because she finally understood, 10 years too late, that she'd have done exactly what he did, and that the real monster was never him or her or even Beck. The monster was the playbook. Find what they love, then squeeze. It had been passed from Beck to her to Ji-ho like a disease, and the only way to ever be free of it was for someone, somewhere, to finally refuse to pass it on. So she refused, and then she went to end the man who wrote it. She came back from that roof a different person. Tae-min didn't know what had happened up there yet, only that she walked in, looked at him and his sister, and said 3 words. "It ends tonight." What followed, I can only give you in pieces, because that's how he lived it. Pieces in fire and noise. Baek knew his spy was blown the moment Ji-ho didn't report in. So Baek did what cowards do when the board turns against them. He stopped playing for territory and started playing for spite. If he couldn't have the city, he'd burn the queen's piece of it to the ground and her with it. He hit her operations all at once. The fish market, the routes, the safe houses, and Tae-min watched her stand over a table of phones and reports and run a war the way other people run a kitchen. Calm, fast, total, sending people he'd never met to live or die with a word. And he finally understood the weight she'd been carrying alone for 10 years. Every word costs a life. She paid in lives all night and never once let her hand shake. And then the lights went out. Not a fuse. Baek's people had found them. Found the safe house above the water, the one place she'd let herself be soft, and they came for it with everything. The next part, Tae-min lived in the dark and the muzzle flash, and I won't pretty it up. They came through 2 entrances. There were 4 guns, including his, and he'd never fired one in his life until that night. Seo-yeon put his sister behind a steel door and put herself between all of them and the stairs, and the warehouse from before had been a dance. But this was something uglier. This was an animal fighting for the one den it had left. Tae-min got hit, and I want to say it heroically, but the truth is he didn't even feel it at first. Just a punch in the shoulder that spun him into a wall, and then heat, and then Seo-yeon screaming his name in a voice he'd never heard her use. A voice with the wall completely gone. Tae-min! She'd watched men die for 10 years without flinching. She came apart over him, bleeding on the floor. And in the half-second, she turned to him. Baek's people pressed in, and Tae-min watched her make the only mistake he ever saw her make. She chose him over the door. She put her body over his, and gave them her back to do it, and a man got close enough to put a gun to her head, and Tae-min was useless, bleeding, watching the most powerful woman in Asia about to die because she loved an idiot who couldn't even hold a gun straight. She didn't die. Someone shot the man with the gun. It was Ji-ho. He hadn't run. Or he'd run. Gotten his daughter to safety and turned around and come back, because the playbook breaks both ways, and a man who'll betray you to save what he loves will also die for the person who finally let him go free. He came through the door behind them with everything he had, and it was enough, and it cost him everything. He took the room apart and took 3 rounds doing it, and by the time it was quiet, he was on the floor beside Tae-min. And Seo-yeon was on her knees between the 2 men she'd refused to lose, one of them bleeding and one of them dying. And for the first time in 10 years, the queen was just a woman with her hands pressed to a wound that wouldn't close. "You stupid man," she was saying to him. "I told you to run. I told you to run." "You let me go," Ji-ho said. He was smiling. There was blood in it. 10 years, you never let anyone go. "You let me go." He found her hand. "She's safe. My girl. She's safe because you gave me the hours." His eyes were going. "It's the first thing I've done in 4 years that he didn't make me do. Let me have it. Let me have one." And he was gone. She held Ji-ho's hand until it went cold. And then she stood up, and she has never in her life been as calm as she was in that moment. Calm is what she does when the chaos is loudest. The night they killed her family, she screamed until she had no voice. She promised herself she would never scream again, and she never has, and she didn't then. She just stood up in a room full of bodies, with the man she loved bleeding on the floor, and the man she'd loved longest dead beside him. And she picked up her gun, and she felt the last soft thing in her close like a fist. "Get him to a doctor," she said to her people, about Tae-min. He was reaching for her, saying her name, and she couldn't look at him, because if she looked at him she'd stay, and she couldn't stay. "Don't let him follow me. Whatever he says, whatever he pays you, do not let him follow me." "Seo-yeon," he said. Don't go alone, Yul." "I've always been alone," she said. "Tonight, I'm just going to act like it one last time." And she went to find Baek. And for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't doing the math. She wasn't weighing the cost. She wasn't the careful queen who never killed when fear would do the work for free. She was 19 again, and her whole family was burning, and the man who lit the match was finally close enough to touch. She let the traitor go, and he came back and died saving her. She's hit, the man she loves is bleeding, and now she's walking alone into the dark to end the man who started all of it 10 years ago. If you are not breathing right now, good, that means you're with me, so hit that subscribe button so you do not miss how this ends. Drop a comment and tell me, Jiho came back. Did you see it coming? Or did that wreck you the way it wrecked me? And smash that like button as hard as you can, because the queen is done being careful, and Beck has no idea what's about to walk through his door. They told Tae-min not to follow her. She'd ordered it. His own blood was soaking through a bandage some doctor had taped on in the back of a moving car, and 2 of her people had their hands on his good shoulder, keeping him down, and she'd made them promise, whatever he said, whatever he paid. So he didn't pay them. He did the one thing he's actually good at. He found her in the wires. Every camera in the city goes blind for her, but Tae-min built the blindness. He knew where the dark spots were, because he designed them, and a woman moving through a city, trying not to be seen, leaves a shape in the places she avoids. He traced the holes she left behind. He gave the address to her own people, and he told them the truth, that she was about to do the one thing she'd never done, walk in without a plan, and that the only person in the world who'd ever made her hesitate was him, and hesitation was the only thing that might keep her alive long enough for them to reach her. They drove, and he'll be honest about why he went. It wasn't to save her. You don't save a woman like that. She'd been saving herself since she was 19, and she didn't need a man with one working arm to start now. He went because she'd spent 10 years walking into the dark alone, and he couldn't stand the thought of her doing it one more time, believing no one would follow. Beck was waiting for her. Of course he was. He'd always been waiting for her. They'd been walking toward this room for 10 years, and they both knew it. He'd holed up in the old district, the corner, and I want you to understand the cruelty of that. He'd chosen, of all the places in the city, the block where her father's shop used to stand, where her family had lived and laughed and burned. He was sitting in a chair on the exact ground where it ended, because Beck understood that the only way to beat her was to make her feel like a girl again instead of a queen. And it almost worked. You came alone, he said, after all these years. Sloppy. The Seoul I made would never have come alone. You didn't make me, didn't I? He spread his hands at the burned ground around them. I lit the match that forged you. Every cold thing you are because of this corner. You should be thanking me. I turned a watch fixer's daughter into the most feared woman in Asia. He smiled. You're my finest work. And here is the thing she had walked in there not knowing. Here is the last piece. Your father didn't even want to do it, you know, Beck said, watching her face. The man who ordered the fire. He hesitated. He had cold feet, so someone above him made the call instead. Signed off on it. A bigger man. A cleaner man. A man whose name you'd recognize, because his son is bleeding in a car somewhere right now, hoping you'll come home to him. The world stopped. You're lying. Kang. He said the name like he was placing a winning card on a table. Kang Industries bought the company that wanted this corner. The old Kang, Tae-min's father. He's the one who signed the order when the other man lost his nerve. He's the reason your mother sang her last song in that kitchen. Beck leaned forward. The boy you let into your bed is the son of the man who had your family killed. And from the look on your face, he never told you, even though I think he knows. I think he's known for days. Tae-min had known for days, and I have to tell you that, because I can't let you hear it from Beck and think he was innocent. He'd traced it the night she told him her story. The date, the district, the company his father bought that same year. He'd held that piece of poison in his chest through everything, through the betrayal and the war and Jiho dying, because every time he almost told her he thought, not yet, not while I might lose her. And he told himself he was protecting her when really he was protecting himself. They reached the corner just as Beck said his father's name. He got out of the car with his one good arm and his soaked bandage, and he saw her standing on the burned ground, and he saw her face when she turned around and looked at him, and he knew that she knew, and he knew she could see that he'd known too. The gun in her hand was pointed at Beck, but her eyes were on Tae-min. She had loved exactly 2 men in 10 years. One of them had died on the floor that night because she'd taught him how to be betrayed, and the other one had been carrying the name of her family's murderer behind his teeth, smiling at her, holding her in the dark while he knew. And Beck was laughing. He'd done it. He'd found the thing she loved, and he'd squeezed. One last time, the only trick he ever had, and it was working. She could feel it working. She could feel 10 years of careful armor cracking down the middle, and the 19-year-old underneath reaching for the only thing that had ever made the pain stop, which was to make someone bleed for it. She could kill them both. She had the gun and the will and the wound to justify it. Seoul, Tae-min said. He didn't beg. He didn't run. He walked toward the gun. I knew. He's right. I traced it the night you told me. And I didn't tell you because I'm a coward and because I just found you and I couldn't. Stop talking. I won't ask you to forgive my father. There's nothing to forgive. He was a monster and he made his money on the ashes of your family, and I have spent every day since I found out hating that his blood is in me. He was close now, close enough that the gun touched his chest, but I'm not asking you to spare me for him. I'm asking you to look at what you're about to become. Beck spent 10 years trying to turn you into the kind of person who'd kill the man she loves on the ground where she lost everything. Don't hand him the win. Not here. Not on this corner. They already took this ground from you once. Don't let him take you too. And Beck, behind him, made his move. Because cowards always move when they think you're distracted. His hand going for the weapon at his side. Here's the thing about doing the math. She'd stopped doing the math when she walked in. She'd promised herself she was 19 again, all instinct, all pain. But you can't unlearn 10 years. The math runs whether you want it to or not. And in the half-second Beck's hand moved, the math ran one last time, and it gave her the cleanest answer it had ever given her. She shifted the gun off the man she loved. And she gave the murderer of her family the only thing he'd never been able to take from her. The last word. No, she said. And she ended it. It's done. Beck is gone. And Tae-min just told her the truth with her own gun against his chest. And she chose, for the first time in 10 years, not to let the pain make the decision for her. We are almost home. So hit that subscribe button right now so you're here for the very last part, because there's still one wound left open between them, and how they close it is everything. Drop a comment. He hid his father's secret to keep her. Forgivable or unforgivable. I need to know where you land. And smash that like button one more time. Because the war is over, but they still have to decide if there's anything left to build out of all this ash. Beck was dead, and the war was over. And you'd think that would be the happy part. It wasn't, because killing the man who started it doesn't unmake any of it. Jiho was still gone. Her family was still ash under their feet. And the man she loved had stood in front of her gun and told her he'd carried his father's guilt behind his teeth for days, while he held her in the dark. She lowered the gun. She didn't shoot him, but she didn't reach for him either. Go home, Tae-min, she said. And for the first time, it wasn't a threat. It was just tired. Get your shoulder fixed. Hold your sister. Go be a man who survived a terrible thing. She couldn't look at him. I can't do this tonight. Maybe I can't do this at all. I don't know how to love the son of the man who lit the match. I don't know if anyone could. Seo-yeon. Please. And the queen said please, which she had not said to anyone in 10 years. Please, just go. And he went. That's the part that broke her, honestly. He didn't fight it. He looked at her one long moment on that burned ground. And he nodded, and he left, and she stood alone in the place where it all began. For the second time in her life. He went home. He got the shoulder fixed. He held his sister. He did everything she told him to do. But he didn't go back to his old life, because there wasn't one to go back to, and because he'd finally understood something it had taken him his whole spoiled life to learn. He'd spent 30 years bored because everything came to him. She was the first thing he ever had to be worthy of. And you don't earn a woman like that with a grand gesture. You earn her the way she'd earned everything in her life. Slowly, in the dark, by proving over and over that you'll still be standing there when the easy version of you would have left. So he didn't chase her. For the first time in his life, he didn't chase. He did the harder thing. He waited and he worked. Here is what the world saw in the months that followed. The world saw the Mafia Queen die. There was a fire, fittingly, a warehouse on the water, a body that the right people confirmed and the wrong people believed, and a story that spread through the underworld like cold water through cracks. The queen is dead. Her empire is broken up, sold off, scattered. The corners change hands. The whispers stop. The name nobody had been allowed to say simply stops being said at all, because there's no one left to fear. It was the smartest thing she ever did. You can't retire from being the queen. There's no door out of that room except the one she built herself, out of a fake fire and a borrowed body and 10 years of being the only person who could erase herself from the world. She'd spent a decade making the city go blind. She used it one last time to disappear from it entirely. The girl who'd had everything taken from her finally took something back, her own ending. And here is what the world did not see. It did not see the thing Tae-min did while she was busy dying. He never told her he was doing it. That was the part that undid her later. He didn't do it for credit, didn't do it as a gesture to win her back. He did it quietly with the one weapon he actually had, the wires, the money, the empire she used to think was so useless. He took his father's fortune, the money built on the ash of her family, and he gave it away, not in a press release, quietly through the channels, to the families of every corner his father's company had ever burned to build itself. He spent his inheritance hunting down the people the Kang name had ruined, and he made them whole, one by one, for a thing his father did before he was even old enough to understand it. He didn't do it for her. He did it because, somewhere in a small room above the water, a woman had taught him that you don't get to keep a fortune built on someone else's grave and call yourself clean. And she only found out because one of the families was hers, a cousin she'd thought was dead. He found her, and he made her whole, and he never once mentioned it to Seo-yeon. That's when she knew. Months after the fire, she was alone at a small house on the coast, the kind of house a dead woman can live in. No guards, no empire, just the sound of the water that had hidden her whole life. And she heard a motorcycle on the road. She didn't reach for a weapon. The old her would have, but I think some part of her had been listening to that exact sound for months without admitting it, because her hand never moved, and her heart did something it hadn't done since she was 19 in a kitchen full of singing. She went out onto the porch. He was getting off the bike. Her bike, actually. He'd kept it. He looked older, and his shoulder still sat a little wrong. And he looked up at her with that same stupid confident smile from a rainy night in an underground arena 100 years ago. The smile of a man who'd never been told no. Except now there was something underneath it the rain-soaked billionaire never had. He'd been told no. He'd survived it. And he'd come back anyway. Not chasing. Just arriving. The way she had once arrived in that arena, out of the rain. You're a hard woman to find when you're dead, he said. That's rather the point. I know. He stayed by the bike. He didn't push. He'd learned. I'm not here to chase you, Seo-yeon. I did the math, finally. You taught me. There's no version of this where I deserve you, and there's no version where I stop wanting to try. He took one step and stopped and let her have the distance. I gave it all away. The money. His name. I don't have an empire anymore. I'm just a man with a borrowed bike and a bad shoulder, standing on a porch, asking the most dangerous woman in Asia if a dead woman is allowed to start again. And the wall she'd carried for 10 years, the wall that survived her family and the police and Beck and Jiho and the whole burning world, the wall that not even a gun to her own head could crack. She let it down. She walked off that porch, and she crossed the distance he'd been too wise to cross, and she put her hand flat against his chest, where she'd once held a gun, and she felt his heart going like a war drum under her palm, while hers, for once, was the calm one. "You found me," she said. "No." His good arm came around her, careful, like she was something that could still bolt. "You let me. I learned the difference." And she laughed, the first real laugh in 10 years. And she rested her head against the shoulder of the son of the man who burned her family, and she understood that forgiveness isn't a thing you decide. It's a thing you discover you've already done. "So," she said into his chest, "what now? No empire, no name, no queen." "No idea," he said, and he held her a little tighter. "For the first time in my life, I have absolutely no idea what happens next. It's the best feeling I've ever had." The water came in. The bike ticked as it cooled. Two people who'd both been forged in fire stood on a porch at the edge of the world, with nothing left to fear and nothing left to prove. And the most feared woman in Asia, the queen everyone whispered about, the girl who'd been told the world would never protect her, finally let herself be held by someone who'd burned down everything he had just to stand there and be worthy of it. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was home. And that's the end. He flirted with a mysterious biker in the rain and learned the hardest lesson there is, that some women aren't chased, they're feared. And then he learned the one after it, that the ones worth keeping aren't one they're earned. If this story made you feel something, anything, then please hit that subscribe button, because I pour everything into these and you showing up is the only reason I get to keep telling them. Drop your final comment and tell me, did he earn her? Did she deserve a soft ending after everything? Would you have let the wall down, or would you have sent him home for good? And smash that like button one last time. From all of us at Heartthread Tales, thank you for staying till the very end. I'll see you in the next one.